SVC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Latino America, bringing together the leadership teams and product specialists from retail and online operators in Latin American markets.
Discover the potential of Latin America's booming iGaming and sports betting markets at SBC Summit Latin America, the premier industry event in the region. Join SBC at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami from October 31st to November the 2nd. Register now at sbcevents.com.
Las Vegas and national casino resort operators MGM Resorts and Caesars Entertainment have recently been rocked by sophisticated cyber attacks which left their properties out of action for days. In Caesars' case, a significant number of rewards members' social security numbers were compromised. Meanwhile, MGM has only just got its customer-facing operations back on track. It is believed that Scattered Spider, a group reported to be made up of Gen Z operatives, conducted the attack. But who are Scattered Spider? And how did a group of people who are barely old enough to legally gamble bring two of the biggest casino operators to their knees? I'm Charlie Horner, Senior Journalist at SBC Americas, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Justin Albrecht, the Global Director of Mobile Threat Intelligence at Lookout. Justin, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Charlie. I'm doing great, thanks.
Great. I guess just to start off, please could you just talk a little bit about your background and how you've become an expert in the field of cybersecurity?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I've been in cybersecurity for around 20 years now. I actually started out in the military, where I worked for the National Security Agency in the US. So I started out not in cybersecurity. I was an Arabic translator and eventually moved into cybersecurity there and worked as a government contractor for the NSA. And about 4 years ago, I moved over to Lookout and headed up their threat intelligence team.
Oh, great. It seems like you've got a lot of experience in this space then. And there's been plenty of reporting on the situation with MGM and Caesars hack in recent weeks. And it's only in the last 7 days that MGM's operations are sort of back up and running. Could you just walk us through who the group are that perform these attacks, and how do you think a group like Scattered Spider can form?
Yeah, sure. So to be clear, we're actually talking about two different groups here. We're talking about Scattered Spider, which is this group that's purportedly made up of youths primarily who do these social engineering attacks that typically target phones initially. And then we have a ransomware group that's called Alpha V or Black Cat. And basically what's happened is that these ransomware groups run what they call affiliate programs. And an affiliate program means that you can join, you share a portion of the profits with whatever hacks that you do. So if you get a ransom, you pay it back to the affiliate program. And with that, you get to use the tooling that they have. So you get to use their ransomware, you get to use their infrastructure, etc. So Scattered Spider, though, this is a group that first came to the public eye in March of 2022. And this was based on some research that showed that they had breached over 130 different organizations, typically by pretending to be a single sign-on service. So they were using phishing SMS links that they were sending to individuals who worked at big companies. And these links were designed to look like a tool like Okta. So like when you sign into, your corporate account, you have to put in your credentials, your login, username, etc. And then you typically get what's called like a two-factor authentication or a multi-factor authentication alert on your phone. So what they do is they'd phish the phone initially, and then they'd basically use social engineering tactics to get that two-factor authentication approved and get into the system. Now, this group actually started out, there's some research that shows that they started out as a group called Star Fraud. And originally what they would do is they hung out together in Telegram in various hacking forums and chats and would do SIM swapping attacks and would typically target at the time, I think when they first started, what's called sextortion. So they'd basically be targeting like young women, kind of convincing them that they're someone else, getting them to send like nude photos or getting them to, share intimate details. and then to threaten them. That seems to be the very initial portion of this group and kind of how they started out. At least that's based on some public reporting that's looked into, essentially research that's looked into this group.
And more recently, there seems to be a concerted effort to target these large casino operators. Why do you think that MGM and Caesars were targeted specifically, and maybe should other casino and gaming operators be vigilant going forward?
So a casino makes a great target for an attack like this because they have to operate. And that's, if you can't hack a casino or a bank and actually get to the money itself, which is a difficult task because obviously they've got a lot of, probably cybersecurity protections in place to prevent that from happening, then the easiest thing to hack is a person and then to put at risk their reputation or their operations, which is what's happened here, right? Now, it doesn't make the casino hacks unique. They're high profile, let's say, but multiple other large organizations in different verticals have been targeted as well. I guess the key takeaway here is that because of how a casino operates, because it needs to operate on a daily basis and take in a lot of money or they start losing money, it makes them a prime target for this because they're going to have to pay if they don't want to keep paying or losing those operating costs on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I guess, these big casino operators, they've got to know the customer. They've got all this information that they can sort of leverage. Are these attacks then purely financially driven to extort ransom money, or is there genuine sort of antagonism towards the casino sector, or is it just like you say, the casino is just an easy target, I suppose?
There's no evidence that there's anything ideological going on, let's say. At least, based on what I've looked into and based on other reports that I've read as well. This is for financial gain. And you can kind of see that in comparing the two different hacks. If you look at what happened with Caesars, they paid their ransom quickly and there's been minimal impact so far to Caesars. Now, if you look at MGM, that's a different story, right? They ended up not paying the ransom and they had an outage for 10 days. They still have some systems that they're bringing back online. So you can see that for them, it's really a business operation.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting to see how they've differentiated between the two operators there. But I guess you've sort of walked us through some of Scattered Spider's history, but have they claimed any other large-scale hacks like the MGM and Caesars ones?
Yes, they actually, there was a big hack. I want to say this was last year when they got to Twilio. They've hacked Reddit. It's been a number of organizations. I think now upwards of 150 and counting. And some of them fairly hard hacks that resulted in them getting a good amount of money. Now, the difference is that before, what they were doing was they were typically targeting organizations to see if they could get access to cryptocurrency. Now is when they've moved into the ransomware game, and it's changed a little bit because now they're deploying ransomware, which makes it another way for them to get money and to get profit from doing these attacks.
Yeah, I guess there's quite a lot of volatility in the crypto sector, and targeting a casino which is cash rich, it makes sense on their behalf to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's move on to sort of the more technical side of this. Using sort of your expertise, how did the group sort of perform these attacks? Were they sophisticated break-ins into the security systems, or do you think there would have been glaring weaknesses that the hackers exploited?
That's kind of one of the most interesting things about these attacks is that it wasn't anything sophisticated at all initially, and this is something that the group specializes in. And probably what's caused a lot of attention around them. Typically when we think of hacking groups, we think of kind of some kind of faceless entity from Eastern Europe or in Russia who, they've found some weakness on your server and now they've gotten in. And that's not what happened here. What happened here is that it started out with one of those phishing links that you get on your phone. Now, this is a targeted one. Like, I'm sure that you probably at some point have received a notification on your phone that you have like a missing package.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there, and it looks pretty obvious. So people still fall for those, surprisingly. But in this case, this is something very targeted. So what they've done is they've investigated the employees at the casino they've identified an employee they could potentially target, and then they make it like a handcrafted message that they send to their phone to try to convince them that it's their company's single sign-on entity. So Okta, for example, like they send them a phishing link through the phone saying that it's coming from IT, and then they need to reset their Okta account. So it starts out with SMS phishing. Now, at that point, once anyone at the company falls for this, it really doesn't matter who it is. They have those credentials, and then they can actually get a reset. And at that point, what happens in the attack is they get the credentials from that initial phishing link. The employee falls for that, but then you have two-factor authentication. That's supposed to protect your account, and you prove who you are by saying on your phone, yes, it's me. But what they did was they called the IT support, and they pretended to be the employee and asked that their multi-factor authentication be reset. So it's all social engineering. What you're really hacking is the person in this case. And then from there, the more technical things happen where they move laterally through the accounts and where they encrypt things and cause more damage. But that's kind of where it starts.
So yeah, it seems like a psychological and very simple way to get in initially, and then they can implement the damage to the operations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing that we used to talk about in the government is why would you target something that's being protected by millions and millions of dollars of equipment and technology when you can find something that's the weak spot? You can actually target the person and trick them and then get into the system in the same way. You save yourself a lot of effort, and it's surprisingly effective.
So you would say that with these kind of attacks, those kind of psychological entries are common?
Absolutely. We see it all the time. Not just with these kinds of attacks. We see it with spying on individuals as well, for example, when we're talking spyware, when we're talking APT attacks. Social engineering is a very easy way to target individuals, especially with a phone where it's, psychologically speaking, we still think of them as a phone and talk of them as phones, but in reality, they're like tiny computers that we have that have the same connections, but they live with us daily from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, whereas our work computers we turn off. So there's also like a psychological element there of you're more likely to interact with these kinds of things on your phones without thinking of it as much as you would as an email, for example, that we're all trained to look at emails and say, this looks really fishy.
Yeah, that's a nice lesson for us all there to keep one eye on what we're doing on our phones. So looking at the specifics of the Caesars case, they have notified stakeholders that hackers could have obtained a significant number of social security numbers of thousands of Caesars Rewards members. Again, what do you think the end goal of this is? Is this to extort more ransom money, or is this sort of, there are fears of identity theft? Is that something that you could see happening as a result of this?
It's absolutely something I could see happening as a result of this. Primarily in this case because they didn't pay the ransom. So, it could be that there's after effects that occur, revenge or, consequences, as probably the ransomware group would deem them, for not paying the ransom, right? And I think I read today that there were actually some lawsuits being targeted at MGM now because of this, because they were able to get into the reward system, which has social security accounts, it has, driver's license information, very sensitive data. So there's a good chance that that data gets exposed.
And again, we mentioned earlier about sort of reputational damage in the casino industry. That's another impact that Caesars could have from this.
Yeah, and I imagine that impact will probably cost a lot more money than the initial ransom. That's the ironic part here.
Yeah, I'm sure it will do. But let's look towards some solutions to these problems. How can casino operators, or I suppose any large-scale business, protect the systems to avoid costly and reputation-damaging attacks, or just, keep those basic technologies protected?
So, in this case, where you have to look at where these things start, we look at what we call the attack chain, which is to kind of map an attack throughout the entire process to determine where you can put defenses. And you want to start as early as possible. So obviously, we saw it started with an SMS phishing link. We want to be able to, one, train employees to be able to recognize these kinds of things and question them and to call in so appropriate training for people who are manning phones or who are likely to face these types of threats would be key. Beyond that, we know that this is a weakness that's not new. It's not new to kind of target people in this manner. So you also need some kind of technology on the phones that says, hey, these are bad links that just came through your SMS or through Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever you're using, and can stop it to also kind of offset that risk from the user not knowing what to do. So that's the easiest way to stop it from the point that it starts. Now, they did get into the systems. There's other things that at play here. And one of the big things at play is what we call identity management. So you have an account in a company and you have a pattern of activity that's normal. You log in at the same time every day. You do it from an account at your house, probably. So you have like an IP address that's mapped to, wherever you live. And all of this behavior can be categorized and mapped as normal. So you need solutions that look for anomalous behavior. They'll look for, logins from something that's not from your normal IP address, for example. So those are kind of identity management tools that look at an account and say, hey, is this really activity coming from the normal user that uses this account, or is it someone else?
So I guess that's a good way of sort of protecting the systems and ensuring that, if this happened again at MGM, then the entire operation doesn't collapse. How do we ensure that, how do we get in front of the social engineering perspective of these things and ensure that someone doesn't fall for the SIM phishing or the SMS phishing?
Well, like I said, there are security solutions that allow you to block phishing that targets phones, specifically designed for phones. At the same time, I think just having the awareness that from an attacker's perspective, all of this is a bit agnostic. They don't look at each different tool that we're using to do our daily lives or to do our work and consider it that different. They look for the weaknesses in either of them, but at the end of the day, they're targeting the individual user, no matter how they have to get to them. So having that awareness that, an attack can come through anything effectively that's connected to the internet, regardless of whether it's your phone or, I think there was an attack at MGM years ago that happened through a fish tank, for example, where they hacked a smart fish tank. So it's, some of these hacks sound crazy, but it's kind of thinking that anything that you have connected to the internet is a risk, especially if it connects to your corporate infrastructure as well. It has some kind of relationship to it. So kind of being mindful of that and being mindful of anything that comes at you unsolicited.
Well, Justin, thank you very much for your insights today. It's been really interesting to get some of your expertise in this situation, because it's been a massive story in the casino space over the last few weeks. So thanks again.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Charlie. I'm glad that you guys had me.
Cheers. Thanks again to Justin for appearing on today's podcast. You can keep up with any further updates on the MGM and Caesars hack stories and all the other US stories in the sports betting and online casino space, such as the court case in Florida. Will the Seminole tribe launch Hard Rock Bet this year in Florida? Read all about this and more over at sbcamericas.com. Thanks for listening to iGaming Daily today, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Latino America, being held at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami on the 31st of October to the 2nd of November. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network. Happy reading.